Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Lead Analyst Logan Mohtashami to talk about the connection between housing inventory, home prices, and sales, and how that might be changing in this economic environment. As always, I want to thank our sponsor, Optimal Blue, for making this episode possible. Logan, welcome back to the podcast.
It is wonderful to be here. And somebody, one of our listeners reminded me that the existing home sales monthly sales report is actually higher than the forecast we had for sales at 4.2 million. And I thought about, one of the things that people saw is monthly supply grow, inventories growing, right? We're getting that seasonal. And in the previous decade, when mortgage demand grows, sales are somewhat elevated, picking up. Total active inventory in the NAR data never grew. It was slowly moving lower and lower. And I thought to myself, this is something that, I try to teach people over the years, but it isn't common post qualified mortgage for active inventory and sales to grow together. It's actually the reversed. For many decades, what we do is crayon economics with our charts. We draw these really black lines. And in the previous decades, when sales grow in the mid 80s, in the 1990s, even from 2000 to 2005, that was a housing bubble demand curve. Inventory would grow and sales would grow. Then here comes qualified mortgage, and here comes the millennials. And in this context, what happened was active inventory was slowly moving lower. When mortgage demand grows, right, we wouldn't see active inventory grow with it. It's the first time in many decades. And I'd always explain it in a very simple way. 70 to 80% of home sellers are buyers, but there's one group of people, right, that do not provide you a house. And they were the biggest home buyers for many years, the millennials, right? They're mortgage buyers. So purchase application data would be rising from 2014. Inventory would be slowly moving down since 2014. So we would have these rising sales, but active inventory would fall. But now you have the case to where sales are so depressed and active inventory is not back to normal, right? The NAR's normal inventory curve is 2 to 2.5 million. That's traditionally would be the case. 1.24 million. We're not even anywhere close to normal. And we're not going to get there in that curve this year. But we can make a case that because sales are so depressed and inventory is not back to normal, you can actually have what we saw in the 80s and 90s and 2000. Hypothetical, I'm not saying this is going to occur, but let's just say mortgage rates go down to 5.375 and stay in a range between 5.375 and 5.87. People will list their homes. You have more sellers that are buyers. Active inventory, because we're not back to normal, can grow and sales can grow. And this would be the first time, I would say since 2000 to 2005 that this could occur, which is like, that's my dream fantasy, that because that would mean that, you couldn't have prices escalate out of control and you get more supply, which the reverse has been happening. This is why the whole oh boy, we're in trouble. Hello, and we might need higher rates here. You never want to have the 2020 to early 2022 housing market ever again, because prices could escalate out of control, and it's no one's really fault. We just don't have enough product. So I saw a little bit of this last year. Now our tracker data is a little bit more prolific than the NARs. We're into the weeds more with active inventory weekly, new listings, price cut percentages, everything. And I'm like last year, I was totally happy. I didn't get this in 2023, but last year we were able to grow inventory, price growth cool down. We have more choices. It allows year to wages for grow, household to form. And boy, you could just see it there. You're just at that point to where you could get growing sales and growing inventory. You don't have to worry about prices getting out of control. And that would be just a beautiful housing market that everyone can be happy with.
So when you look at these, when you look at this, is your price forecast still, do you stand by the price forecast, or has that changed any?
As of now, my price forecast, again, like last year, might be a little bit too low, but we're still in the range. Now, when we talk about price forecasts, the history of home prices, it kind of moves with inflation. Like between 4.7 to 5.3% is the norm. Nothing abnormal about that. But the reason I don't like doing the inflation theory, by the way, there's like people that like forecast. I'm not a big believer of like 2-year forecasting, or
Right.
so some poor Wall Street firm had he had 4% mortgage rate forecast in 2025. He did it in 2023. And I totally get it. If you really believe that we were going to go into a recession, then yeah, you could. I mean, in theory, you could make a case there's a four handle, but I never thought that to be very useful. Things change, man. I mean,
Things.
and you kind of have to go with the new data, and if you forecast so far out. But last year, my price forecast was a little bit lower than everyone else's. And how do I explain that? Well, I'm not a mortgage rate lockdown person. I believe active inventory could grow with higher rates, right? And then price growth can slow down in that environment. I thought I was going to be right. I thought the curve, my whole model curve was working. And I was like, okay, it's going to work. It's going to work. And then mortgage rates went lower, right? And even in the seasonal soft period, the price growth actually firmed up. And because of that, I lost my curve, and we ended up, depending on there's so many different price people between Zillow, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, Case Shiller, everybody, but it looks like 4% home price growth. So I was off by about roughly like by 1.7%. But here I was even lower than last year, 1.77%. And why? Uh, Active inventory can grow. With that, the price cut percentages with elevated rates can stay elevated, and the price growth can cool down. Now, 1.77 that's back-to-back years of real home prices being negative. But here, if rates actually went down to 6%, you could get active inventory to grow, and prices won't like get out of hand on a national basis. And I always say this, I always put into consideration Texas and Florida and parts of the U.S., the states that are dealing with a little bit different issues than other parts of the country. Mike Simonson does these great webinars where he talks about like a kind of a quarterly update and gives people an idea about where the pricing curve is. And what I do is I try to calculate, well, if Texas and Florida are the states that are in trouble with pricing and everywhere else, those go into the equation. And we always highlight this. If I take 2007 to 11 out of the equation from post-World War II, we only had 1 year nationally where home prices fell. It was 1990. It was 1% only, but a lot of that had to do with Southern California. The economy back there wasn't very good, and that allowed the curve to go lower. So we've had so many years where we were like at zero home price growth or one home price growth. And that traditionally what happens after you have a very hot period of home prices, there's basically a very, very lull period where in theory, real home prices are negative. You don't see much nominal home price growth. And I'm running off of that out here. So active inventory growing and sales growing. Oh, Sarah, I mean, I'm telling you, that would be the most perfect year. I saw glimpses of it last year, and but rates didn't stay low enough, long enough to really grow sales. But in this case, I'm seeing here, I'm looking, okay, it's year to date, purchase application data is positive, right? If rates just go down to 6%, it doesn't take, because you're working from such low levels, and you can actually grow sales and inventory, and that would be like, out of all the years I've worked in HousingWire, that would be the perfect year, right? And what I saw in 2020, 2021, 2022 was not what I consider healthy. But last year, healthy, like we're getting back there. But if you can grow sales and have inventory grow and price growth is very tame and normal, that would be perfect.
That would be perfect. It's interesting to me, inventory and home prices. I mean, we know people who, they put on social, like there's 25 people standing outside this open house. That still happens. That's still happening in different markets, depending on where you are. And on the other hand, you have markets maybe like Austin, where things are staying on the market much longer, and you're seeing prices come down quite a bit. So, from your perspective, that national home price, what is the best use of that when you're out there and you're running a
Well, I
business?
mean, you always go off of your local market, but in general contexts, right? If national home prices are falling, there's something wrong with the economy. That's basically it's 84 years of macroeconomic data out there. It's because it's really rare for home prices to fall. So 2007 to 11, what happened? Credit boom, credit bust, foreclosures, and how I try to explain it is, if you look back in that marketplace, we had 4 million active listings in 2007. Then it started to fall, right? A lot of people keep on saying, well, inventory was falling. Inventory was up here, but the homes that were coming onto the market were all distressed, right? That's why we always highlight the new listings. New listings data back then, 250 to 400,000
Per week?
per week. I mean, it's the funny thing is, the new listings data, the peak in the last 5 years was like 91,000 one week.
Wow.
91,000, even if I doubled that, wouldn't be the lowest level of the 2008 to 2012
Right.
new listings curve, because they were forced credit sellers. When you're underwater, your foreclosures or bankruptcy, shorts, whatever it is, you are not a functioning housing market, because that was nationally an economic story. It's not the case. And we always highlight, like back then, 23% of the homes plus were underwater, record lows now. The loan to value, this is the killer one. The loan to value back then, with the people that do have mortgages, 40% of homes don't have a mortgage, but it was like 85%.
Yikes.
So you didn't have much wiggle room. The crazy thing is, like, I can do all these crazy stats. The average down payment now is 18%, for a house. So the LTV values actually would be negative if we had like very, very low down payment loans. But at 18%, that's a lot of nested equity. So then, of course, a lot of people make the big deal. FHA, there's a foreclosure crisis. Guys, 2007 to 11 was a foreclosure crisis. We've had decades and decades of recessions without having a crisis. Not everything is going to be a crisis. Okay. So the loan to value at 46.6. Oh, it's like, if I was a bearish Chinese, Russian, or Iranian, or an anti-central bank person, and I actually read housing data, and I'm sitting there telling people home prices are going to fall 40%, I'm cuckoo. I'm gone. I'm gone. I'm Jack Nicholson's in One Flew to the Nest. But a different marketplace. Each cycle is very unique in its way. Austin is a really good example. Somebody asked me about Austin like a year ago, and I remember telling them, imagine if America went up 76.5% in home price growth in 2.5 years. 76.5, because that was Austin. But you went from a 3% mortgage market to a 7% mortgage market. But imagine if America needed foreigners to come to your country to buy homes, because Austin needs migration, right? Because it's elevated. So the areas that need migration, if migration slows, you have less buyers. Your pool of buyers have to come from the local economy. And does your local economy really have the wages to offset? So that's another variable that you have to go into it. And of course, Florida. I mean, let's be honest here. Florida wants to get rid of property taxes. And I was actually, I watched a DeSantis speech on Instagram videos. It just popped up. I was like, how did you get here? And I could see where he's going at. Migration slowed in Florida, and homeowners are mad. But the local population, if migration slows, the local population has to do the bulk of the buying. And insurance, I mean, they are allowing insurance to come and charge as much as ever. So they have coverage, but the costs are up. So in that context, I totally get what he's doing. He's trying to get the cost of housing down for homeowners and home buyers, because if migration slows, right, he's got to find a way to get people to come here, and he's got to find people within the intricacies of the local economy to buy homes, and that had been the problem. Of course, Florida has this condo issue that is very is much different than other places. And the condo market is in a lot of areas where I think anybody who knows the mortgage industry, boy, those condo approval projects for certain places, man, you just,
It's going to be rough.
yeah,
Well,
you're not gonna get it. So you limit the ability to buy homes, get mortgage buyers in that situation.
okay, so contrast that with what the insurance situation in California, right? Both coastal areas, both have some, obviously coastal California, some of the highest priced real estate in the whole nation, but they were like, hey, you can't raise prices. So first you had, insurers leave. Then they said, okay, we can, we'll have a different system. State Farm's back in, but is like, okay, we want to raise it like this huge amount after the fires. And they're like, no, you can't. So it's a really interesting situation, the contrast there between Florida and California.
Savagely unhealthy in that sense.
Yeah.
It's one of these things where you talk about fires and hurricanes and tornadoes, and you're getting to the economic side that isn't just the destruction side; it's the ability to insure. And I don't know where FEMA is going. I don't know where what in general is going to be how the federal government works for this. So it's going to be interesting over the next few years to see. Like, I want to see what does FEMA look like after Trump gets to do his thing to everything, and is it good? Is there going to be like, well, if we give you money, I could totally see this happening. We're not going to give California any money unless XXXX happens.
Right. I think they're already saying that.
Yeah. So it's fascinating to see if that's the case. And there's a lot of rumors and speculations of what's going to happen with Freddie and Fannie out there, and we're entering a phase where we were always kind of somewhat sure of what the government role was, and we're not sure what the government's role was. And regarding an insurance, if your insurance company keeps on raising prices, but a lot of these states and cities were always banking on FEMA coming in.
It's a good point.
They can't fund it. And one thing about California, I remember in 2014, I was at the BNY Mellon Stock Conference in California, and that was my first presentation with Bloomberg Financial back then. And I said that 82% of the working population in California is priced out of housing.
And that was 2014?
That was 2014. It's basically still stayed the same, because if you're buying a house in California, you really make 3 times more the income. So I think the income back then was like 60,000. So I was like, home buyers don't make that. Home buyers make a lot more. So if people want to know, like, how do we have 5 million home sales? Home buyers always made a lot more, right? That's why I'm not the biggest fan of like median income to median price thing, because it doesn't equate. Home buyers, especially dual household incomes in California, make money. But in this context, the affordability issue gets much worse, right, with insurance, because insurance keeps on going up higher and higher. You don't know when this is going to end.
True.
And I think that's the thing going out. A lot of people say, well, the bulk of the insurance costs are, already in, and it'll slow itself down. You don't know how many fires and hurricanes are coming. And if FEMA's not coming in the future years, what do you do? How do you operate? And that's why when I did that interview with Yahoo early in 2024, there are just some places in America that home buyers just say, no, I'm not going to deal with it. If I can't get insurance and my insurance cost is here and FEMA's not going to come in, I'm not risking my family's, I'm going to go somewhere where I'm not going to get fires. I'm not going to get hurricanes. I can
Okay,
go
but
somewhere cold.
where is that? I mean,
Boise. Boise, I've been to Boise twice. I love it there. I tell, like, if there's one place I would move to, I'd be going to Boise. But the Midwest,
well, okay, but we just did it.
Ohio, Illinois, those areas are, affordable, and you don't really have like the
So
natural.
we just did a story that hailstorms are the new hurricanes as far as how much it costs and how much your insurance is going to go. And Midwest,
but your house
is hailstorm central.
Your house isn't going to get destroyed within like 30 minutes.
True.
That's
normally,
it's different. It's different with hurricanes and fires. Pacific Palisades burned down in a very short amount of time. A hurricane could just, so it's different, because what are you going to do? You can't do anything in regards to that. Your house is pretty much destroyed, and then the whole process of your children, school, everything. Do you really want to deal with that? I mean, if it's becoming more and more common, right? Do you want to deal with that? And parts of their country that doesn't have those situations, for some people, not everyone, but for some people, it just makes sense.
Maybe Arizona. I don't think Arizona has a lot of natural disasters.
No, I think the heat in Arizona is really the thing that some people don't like, but yeah, I mean, there's parts of the country that just aren't prone to hurricanes and fires. They're cold, they're hot, but they're not. They don't have the natural disasters. And if this gets worse as time in history, if it starts to get more common that these things happen, there's a higher risk that you lose your house.
So true. Logan, thank you so much for being on. We have so much going on. I know I'll talk to you again very soon. Thank you for your time today. Always instructive, always insightful.
Pleasure to be here, Sarah.